Today we're going to learn about how to draw a more realistic eye. So a lot of times when I ask young artists or non-art people to draw an eye, I get something that looks kind of like this if I'm lucky. And in this case, you do have the basics. You have the opening of the eye, you have the iris, which is the colored part, you have the pupil, which is the part that dilates and lets in and out light. We got some eyelashes. We're usually missing this part, this part, this part, this part, this part, and any shading. So we're not doing that anymore. We're going to be doing a realistic eye, and I'm going to walk you through the steps today of how to do that. You're going to follow along with me, and what you need is just a regular pencil. It can be one that you sharpen or a mechanical pencil. Shading is easier with a regular pencil. And you're going to follow along with me so that at the end of class today, you should have one that we draw together and then one that you draw on your own, okay? So before we get started, I want you to look at this guy, okay? Because instead of starting with the shape of the eye or the iris, we're actually going to start with the shape of the eye socket. So if you understand what the skull looks like when we actually start drawing people, it helps you to understand the structure that holds up the face. So when we start to draw the eye, we have to think about the structure of the whole eye socket. To think about how the eyeball sits in there. So the first thing that we're going to draw is the eye socket, and considering how it goes down by the side of the nose, it's actually very deep and goes down past the nose, like halfway into the nose area, and how this is the ridge of where your eyebrow is. So I just kind of wanted to show you this so you would think about the structure underneath the skin that supports what we're actually drawing on the surface, okay? All right, so step number one is to draw that eye socket. I start, now follow along, you're going to follow along with me, with the shape by the side of the nose, okay? So that's the side of the nose, and then I go up and over. That's going to be the eye, where the eyebrow would be. And then I come around and down into a shape like this. And that would be the eye socket. Okay? I'm going to zoom in a little bit so that you can get a little closer as we do this. Okay? All right. So now I've got the shape of the eye socket. Then I have to imagine how the eyeball itself is in the socket. We've already practiced drawing eyeballs earlier this year, so hopefully you can kind of remember that. So the eyeball sits inside the eye socket. A lot of times kids are like, can I have something to trace? I don't need you to trace this. It doesn't need to be a perfect circle, but do remember this: when I am drawing a circle, I don't draw it from my wrist, I draw it from my shoulder. It helps me make a better circle. So I might practice and then draw a circle, okay? And then I can go in and kind of make it a little bit darker. Notice how it sits kind of in the center of the eye socket, okay? So take a second, make a circle. It does not have to be perfect, within the center of the eye socket, okay? All right, so now we have the eye socket and the eyeball, and we need to start to build the structure of the opening of the eye. The top of the eyeball gives me a guideline for where the crease of my eyelid is, okay? So I'm just going to, starting about halfway through the center of my eye, I'm just going to come up and I'm going to curve a shape around my eyeball like this, okay? That is the curve of the top of the lid where it creases. And, you know, different people, it's called an epicampic fold, and different people have different structures to their eyes, and they're all going to look a little bit different. But the eyeball itself can help us get a form or a shape for that, all right? So we've got a curve here. On this side, close to the side of the nose, we're going to have a tear duct. Our tear duct always sits on the side closest to the nose. And to add that in, I'm just going to make like a little kind of C shape right here. And that's going to be for my tear duct. All right. So this is the fold. So that means that there's actually a lid part right here. And most people, when they draw the lid, they do this. Okay, like they do this kind of thing. But the truth is the opening of the eye has a little bit more structure. You know, if this is the tear duct, this is the curve around the top of the eyeball. But then the part that opens tends to go up and then a little bit straight actually, and then down. Okay, so it's more of a three-part shape than just a curve. So I'm going to come here and I'm going to go up, over, and then down. Okay, so that there's like a little bit of a flat part in the center there. Okay, and most people think of the eyelid as being not quite like thick, but there's a thickness to it, and I can actually sometimes see that thickness of it. So I'm adding a little, like if I think about bubble lettering this right here on this side, so I can see a little bit of the thickness of the eyelid. Usually I don't really see very much of it here, and I might see a little bit of that thickness on that side as well. Okay, so it shows me that the skin on top of the eye is not paper thin, and has a little bit of thickness to it. So that's the structure of the top eyelid. Now we're going to work on the structure of the bottom eyelid. And again, most people tend to do this kind of thing where they just curve it like this, but the truth is it tends to be straight and then curve up. So everybody, again, if you're looking at a regular person's eye or you're drawing a specific person, their structure is going to be something you have to notice. But in our case, when we're just making one up, we're just following the general rules, okay? All right, so the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to come over here. On the bottom part of my C for my tear duct, I'm just going to go straight across and then angle up. So straight across and then angle up. So I can see how this is the opening for that eyeball. Okay, this too has some thickness to it. So I'm just going to add a little bit of that thickness for that bottom eyelid. We call this the water line because it's the little part that catches our tears before they fall out. So now I've got that in there, okay? And just like we had on the top, we're using the structure of the eyeball to know where the bottom eyelid is. And a lot of people don't like to put this in because they think it makes them look like they have bags under their eyes, but literally everybody has that, or you can't close your eyes. So it's important to acknowledge that when you're drawing realistically. Okay, using my eraser and erasing the areas where the eyeball shows through the lids, okay, because that's not, we don't need that anymore, okay? So now I have the basic structure of the eye. I need to think about the iris and the pupil. And so the iris is the colored part of the eye, and the pupil is that center point, the black point that opens and closes, gets bigger and smaller to let in and light or keep light out, okay? We're going to start by thinking about the fact that usually unless our eyes are open really wide, we don't usually see all of the iris, okay? So instead, what we're going to do is maybe make part of it kind of go under the top eyelid, okay? So I made it so that it's centered, looking at us, but the top of that iris would actually be up here, under the top eyelid, okay? So go ahead, make sure. All right, so I'm back with you. Now we need to add the pupil too, okay? So the pupil also, I'm going to make a little bit higher, and I'm going to think about the light reflecting on it. So I'm going to make a little shape in there. That's the light reflecting. And when you're looking at a real one, obviously, you're going to think about where the light's actually reflecting. So what I've got here is the structure of the eye, basically, okay? And, when we go in and start shading this, which is the next step, that's going to give us the definition. It's going to give us the ability to make it look more 3D, okay? And I'm just going to point out again, we're making this one up. So I'm following basic guidelines. Whenever you're drawing a real person from life or from a photograph, you should look at the details in that image or on that person. Okay. Usually there is a shadow along the outside edge of the nose, going down towards the eye. We do this in what we call a two-step phase. And so we're going to make a really light up and down shadow here because that's kind of the direction that this goes. But if I'm shading with the curve of the form, then I also know that I can't go up and down for something that wraps around like this. So I'm going to lightly shade over the top of the eye here, knowing that I also need to shade a little bit in this corner, and a little bit in this corner, and a little bit under here, and under here. Okay. I'm not pressing really hard. I'm pressing gently. I can always come back and add more shading. What I can't do and make it look super great is erase it. So I'm going to go back in here and I'm going to continue to layer some shading, thinking about the curve of the eye into this corner. Okay. It's going to be darker along that lid where it tucks in. Okay, so you can go in there and darken that part up to be able to get it well shaded here. Okay. Honestly, I would spend a lot more time than what I'm doing right now on this part. I would really be looking, if I was drawing a real eye, I'd really be looking at where the shadows fall to make sure that I'm trying to match my values. Okay, but that gives me a basic shape. Okay, next we need to think about the eyeball itself. Most people don't think about this, but the sclera, which is the white part of the eye, we actually really want to leave it only white in a few places. The eyelids cast shadows onto the white of that eye, so I'm going to make sure that it's actually a little bit gray. And the darker part of the shadow is going to be up here where it touches the eyelid and down here. But I'm thinking about it kind of curving. Okay, and so over in this corner, and I'm going to take that shadow up along that ledge of the eyelid and a little bit along the bottom here. Okay. That gives me the sense that the eyeball is actually tucked in under the eyelids, and it casts a shadow there. Okay, so you can already see this is getting a little bit more depth and dimension. I might go back and like remind myself of the thickness there, because this part of where the skin has some thickness is going to have a little bit of shadow there too. Okay, notice I have not put in eyelashes. Your eyelashes are the finishing touch. We do not want to have to shade around all those eyelashes. So for now, I'm not putting eyelashes or an eyebrow on. I want to do all of my shading before I do that part. Okay, pupil tends to be black, so we're shading it dark. And then the iris. Now we've talked about in the past that the iris has a lot of different characteristics. And you know, if we were doing this in color, we'd look at all the different variations of color in the iris. So I'm going to put variations in the value, the shades that I'm adding here, as I work on adding details to my iris. Okay, sorry, I keep having to pause to like end classes and things like that. So the next thing that we need to think about here, after we get the shading in here, is also on the tear duct. The tear duct wouldn't be bright white like this, so we just want to put a little bit of shading into this area as well. Now, obviously, like I said, if you were actually looking at a person, you would have a lot of different values here. We're doing like a 2-value stage. 2 values is one area that's a little bit of a darker value, like this where the lid is, along the side of the nose, a little under here, and then a lighter value. So like less pressure, a little bit lighter, and you know, along this side of the eye, I still want that crease to be evident. And then I tend to make a little curve like this. You don't have to, but it does tend to like bend around here to make it look a little bit more like it bends around. All right. Now, once you've got something basic like this, obviously I know a lot of kids would like to smudge this. It's okay with me if you use your finger or a blending stump to blend this, but you also don't really need to because this is just our warm-up. But if it's bothering you a lot and you feel like you need to, you can smudge it. After you've gotten it shaded to the way that you like, then comes the part where we add the finishing touches. Okay, finishing touches include maybe even making a third value that's a little bit darker in those corners, right at the edge of under the eye, maybe just a little bit on this side. That will make it a little bit more, a little bit in the corner of this part of the eye, to give it a little bit more depth. Don't be afraid to add values, because the other thing is your eraser is always your friend. If it gets too dark, you can always go back in and pull out some highlights. Okay, this is a warm-up one, so I'm not going to spend forever on it. We've done one together. Now I'm missing something. I'm missing the hair parts. I'm missing the eyelashes and eyebrow. So we're going to start with the eyebrow. If I think about the shape of an eyebrow, it tends to follow the bone here of the eye socket. So this allows me to make a shape of an eyebrow that goes around the eye socket. And then this eyebrow hair, we don't want to make it grow up. It tends to grow kind of going to the side. And I'm just kind of filling this area in by making little pencil strokes that curve along that ridge of the eyebrow. You know, some people have really thick eyebrows, some people have really thin ones, some people have ones that they, you know, have a little bit more hair in the front and less on the side. Again, everybody's is going to be a little bit different, so when you're drawing a real person, you'd have to look at the shape. But making sure that you have a variety, some that go up and some that kind of curve, that's going to make it look more realistic. And then the eyelashes, they do not look like this. Okay, this looks like needles coming in to punch the eye. We want something that does more of this shape. Okay, and we also want to kind of bunch them a little bit together. So if you kind of think like check mark, okay, and some that are a little short and some that are a little long, and they can layer on top of each other, that's a little bit more realistic. They tend to be shorter closer to the tear duct and longer on the outer edge. The way I normally start is making little check marks that are longer, and then kind of come in and smudge a little bit of like short ones, curving around. And then when I get to about the beginning of this like straight part of the eyelid, then I curve them the other way a little bit and shorten them. Okay, you might notice that sometimes the shadow of the eyelash shows up on the white of the eye, and that starts to make it look a little bit more realistic. Then along the bottom, again, short, closer to the tear duct, not as many, and kind of like more curving down. But you get something that looks a little bit like this. And then you can refine it. You can be like, okay, well, I still feel like I need a little bit more shadow here. I feel like I want this part to be a little darker around the outside edge. I feel like, you know, I need this. Now, when drawing the other eye, and you don't have to do this part, I'm just going to point something out. If I were really drawing a set of eyes, I would honestly draw back and forth. I wouldn't draw one eye and then the other. Most of the time people get very caught up in drawing one eye and then they can't match it on the other side. Whereas if I draw one, and I'm just gonna like, here are my eye sockets, If I had something like, I would start by drawing one and then the other at the same time, because that helps me match and make it look a little bit more similar. It just tends to work better if you do them at the same time rather than I'm doing one and then the other. All right, so now we've done one together. What I would like for you to do is take a photo of your own eyes. And I would like you to spend the rest of the class period working on trying to draw one of your own eyes, or maybe both of them, okay? And at the end of class today, you will photograph and submit both the one we did together and whatever you do on your own of your own eyes, okay? I look forward to seeing what you guys come up with.